Wind. More so, the whole concept of wind is one of my favorite types of weather, not just because I'm called Storm, that usually brings a lot of wind, but because of the emotions that we can feel from it. Wind moves lighter forms of life around the world, guides animals in navigation, and relating back to storms, foreshadows something greater to come: change. Through all these things, wind is a power that helps life on Earth, but can also take life just as quick. And although the physical power of wind is something that we should all fear, wind also carries another weight of power: emptiness, desolation, barren. At its best, we can experience the wind in a place where it can pass through freely with minimal resistance, and although wind can be blocked and shielded when you are in shelter, but when you're standing out there experiencing the wind, there's a feeling of solitude that arises, as wind can hinder our hearing, one of our most important senses in helping us perceive our reality. And although that's not what the wind in the Forbidden Lands aims to do, it manages to show us that the barren world of Shadow of the Colossus and the little life that lives in this land. I also want you to keep in mind that I'm still playing through the game, and these are my thoughts and analysis of up to the 11th Colossus. And also, before we do get going, I have made a Discord community. If you want to hang out, discuss games and other interests that you have, it's linked in the description, and more on that later. But let's just dive into the world of Shadow of the Colossus. For many people, Shadow of the Colossus is one of the games you turn to when discussing which video games are considered as the greatest pieces of art. I've played my fair share of games, and even though they greatly vary from each other, they can be classified as art for completely different reasons. The Last of Us is a work of art for the way it managed to tell its story, whilst Super Smash Bros. Ultimate can also be considered a work of art for being one of the greatest video game crossovers of all time. Shadow of the Colossus, on the other hand, although it has a story just as gripping as The Last of Us, I find the greatest aspects of it being called art in its world. The Forbidden Lands, the name of the area in Shadow of the Colossus, is stunning. Although I am talking from having played the 2018 remake, which is breathtaking in graphic fidelity, it's the scope and beauty of the world what makes me appreciate it. Upon entering the temple, making conversation with the entity known as Dormin, and exiting the temple, you're introduced to a landscape that stretches for miles, filled with mountains and grassy plains. But something doesn't feel right. Well, no, right isn't the correct word to explain this feeling. No, what I'm meaning to say is that as a player, I felt that I'm being intrusive of this foreign land. The basic synopsis of Shadow of the Colossus is that you, Wander, have gone to the Forbidden Lands in order to talk with Dorman, a god of sorts I guess, to give you the necessary aid to help resurrect a dead young lady that you have brought with you, and to even have a slimmer of hope to revive her. You are tasked with defeating the 16 Colossi that roam the lands. That's the very basic outline, I know, and I am trying to make it short and sweet for the purpose of the video, but that's the premise. You have to take the lives of 16 Colossi in order to resurrect the life of one person, which is a discussion I'll save for later, but what I was going to talk about was how little life you are greeted with upon exiting the shrine for the very first time. You go out, and the greatest form of life that you see before you aren't people or animals, but rather nature itself. There are a few birds and small critters that roam the area, but the biggest form of life that we see before us is the world itself, which is not a common train of thought. We view areas with humans and animals as lively, which in turn directly suggests that places that don't have animals inhabiting the area as dead, lifeless. And although the world here is barren to its core of any sort of human life, and the animal life here being mere exceptions, the luscious green grass, the towering trees, and the flowing water all depict a world that is alive and well. But what does this show us? How is the world alive yet so lifeless at the same time? Is it a commentary on how we as humans are the root of all the problems in our world? Well, something like that, I guess. A quote from Joel Shepard reads, upon being asked why one human is good whilst 100 humans are bad, one human is just a person. 100 humans make a society. Not saying that each and every society is poor, but there are some flaws in which we live as societies, creating multiple hierarchies and the rules that lead to discrimination, which ultimately leads to problems that come from nothing. And this is what I feel is echoed in the Forbidden Lands. You, Wander, are the only person wandering, excuse the funny pun, very funny indeed, these lands, discovering the landmarks yourself, and learning of a society that is sound and functioning with no clear leader. It's just that nature lives in harmony with the few forms of life that reside here, and all the colossi live in their designated areas, far from each other, not having the need to interfere and cause problems for the others, avoiding unnecessary conflict. This world that is inhabited by beings that could cause mass destruction are put at bay by the way nature has taken control of this land, and although the world is lifeless from our human perspective, the world is filled with life that we still struggle to comprehend. A life that is barren, but at peace with itself. However, the world slowly falls apart as Wander continues on his quest of taking the lives of the 16 colossi. There is a quote by Jeff Dekari that goes, "Good or bad is created by humans and pertains only to them." It shows that what is good or bad is made by our consciousness and it only affects us. This quote, even if I have some minor disagreements with it, because as a Christian I believe that God has already laid out what is right or wrong, and I also believe that our actions do affect the world around us, even if the world can't communicate it back properly to us. I feel that it shows an important part of our humanness: ignorance. Many people take offense to the word ignorance, but in its literal term it means the lack of information, which is something that we all suffer from. I, for instance, am very uncultured about the culture in Southeast Asia, which is a place I really want to visit someday, whilst other people can know little to nothing about sports. I mean, this is normal, as there is no human who can know everything, as you can know bits and pieces of many things. Knowing everything is, well, I won't say impossible, but highly unlikely. And this ignorance leads us to another message that the world of the Shadow of the Colossus manages to show us: the value of life. The plot of Shadow of the Colossus is driven by Wander's desire to resurrect Mono, the dead girl whom he takes with him, and in order to resurrect her, he must kill and slay the 16 colossi. The main objective is probably the most gut-wrenching part of the game. Playing a game, there have been many times I felt bad playing a game, reluctant to progress the game either by wanting to keep the game in this happy state, like the end game of Link's Awakening, or on the other hand being forced to do actions that I don't want to take part in myself, like The Last of Us Part 2. Unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Shadow of the Colossus falls into the latter of these two feelings. Seeing the colossi move around, doing their own things, only getting aggressive once I, a human, draw the first blood of contact, hurts me in ways that I never expected. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, that I felt that I was being intrusive of the natural world's peace and harmony by simply exploring it, and then having to scale the colossi and stab their weak points is even more painful to do, as I'm intruding them, their personal space, their lives. These noble creatures, often slow and methodical in their movements, does not sit well with me, and as I slowly whittle their health down to nothing, they collapse. Ground shakes, sound booms, spirit leaves them, and the spirit that then enters Wander knocks him out. As a result of consuming the spirit of the Colossus, Wander's stamina bar increases, which is, in the most direct or indirect way, depending on how you view it, communicating to the player that with each Colossus you slay, you are benefiting from it and getting stronger. You get stronger by killing others. This message to me brings up a complicated topic to cover: the value of life. Now, depending on who you ask, some people will say that all lives are equal in value, whilst others will disagree with that statement, and it's the second line of thought that this game wishes to show in order to prove the first thought, and much more. The Colossi, massive in scale, wander and seemingly guard over the land they inhabit. Wander isn't even from this place. He's a foreigner with a goal to save one life. So to achieve this goal, from a pure maths standpoint, that means that 16 Colossus lives is the same value as one human life. And this is what hurts me while playing the game. It doesn't sit with me to slay these 16 noble creatures to just save one person. It brings up those popular social experiment questions, like the popular train track hypothesis. If you haven't heard it, let me explain it. There's a train roaring down the tracks and there are 5 people tied up on that line with no way of getting out. You are standing at the control panel, controlling the direction of the tracks, and you can save these 5 people by pulling the lever and changing the course. But on the other track is one person tied up on the track, This leaves it to the option of, are you willing to let 5 people die when you could have saved them, or save 5 people and take the life of 1 person? It is a tough choice, putting morals and ethics to the test, and Shadow of the Colossus puts a different twist on it. Are you willing to kill 16 Colossi with only a chance of bringing back a loved one back to life, or let the giants live, but knowing that there was a way to bring back the loved one by killing them? The reason what makes the Shadow of the Colossus moral question harder is not because of how the question is posed to the player, but rather because there is no choice. You are not Wander, and your actions do not change Wander's objective, which therefore puts you in a place where you don't want to partake, but you are forced to do it. Personal feelings aside, the dilemma shows us one thing. It helps us come to terms with what we believe is the value of life, whether it should be so easy to take many lives in exchange for one, or if it should stay as it is. But by experiencing the deaths of the Colossi, we find our own feelings and how we view the situation, but all this brings up one final point, and it is how much we truly end up valuing the past. Like the current world we live in, and the values of lives that have yet to be lived, the past is the third part that creates this holy trinity of sorts, linking together with the other 2 parts that I've been talking about throughout this video. However, unlike the world and death, which are both communicated in a fairly hands-on manner way to the player, the past is described only subtly as you explore. Not subtle that you have to go out of your way to understand it, but subtle that your mind slowly picks up on the many small hints and aspects it wants the player to see. Our minds function in a very peculiar manner. Not the mind per se, but rather the brain. A quick search can tell you that we only comprehend 10% of how our brain functions, and if you ask me, if my inputs in Guilty Gear only work 10% of the time, that'd be the beatdown of the century I'd be receiving. But this 10%, the small figure, shows us that even if we only understand a fraction of what it can do, there is still 90% of it working in the background, meaning that many complex emotions and actions we take are mysteries, and we haven't found any rational reason to explain it. And that is exactly how our emotions work. Sure, we do understand how some of them work to an extent, but how they get there, what triggers them at times, well, we don't know. Or, I don't know at least, I'm not a scientist. What I do know is that our brain is mighty good at taking in hints that we wouldn't think of in normal circumstances. Our brain is constantly working, and it manages to pick up on the subtle hints all around, and you guessed it, this is what it does in Shadow of the Colossus. One common thought I had while playing this was, what happened before all of this? Before the game. But how did the game manage to get me to think about it? For one, it's in the environmental storytelling of the game. This world that we are exploring is long gone, like I've mentioned earlier. Nature has found its peace from humanity, but when did this happen? How did this land get rid of its life here? But because the numerous shrines around the world all suggest to the player that they aren't the first human to have set foot here, and they're far from the last one either. There are many small hints around the world of Shadow of the Colossus that give us hints as to what the world here was before we all came here, but the hints seen in the architecture and roads in the Forbidden Lands are all left vague enough for us to think about it and draw our own conclusions as to what had happened. However, apart from the history of the lands being left up to the player to discover by the player, there is another past that is even more present in the game, encouraging the player to think about what has happened. The girl, Mono. You start your journey, bring the dead Mono to the shrine in hopes of resurrecting her, and after each Colossus you have slain, you are sent back to the shrine, to the ever so familiar sight of the light shining through the pillars, landing and resting on Mono. The imagery of Mono, repeated many times, is not just a reminder to the player as what their ultimate goal in the game is, but also poses 2 other foods for thought. For one, Mono is a tool used to get the player thinking about their relationship Wander has towards Mono. There is a little explanation in the game up to the point I'm at currently, and it is interesting to think about. Is Mono a blood relative, a lover, a civilian who had lost their life to the consequences Wander had done earlier, leaving him with a tremendous feeling of guilt to try and save her? There are so many theories that you can draw just by simply looking at the same scene of the shining light that rests on Mono, and it's up to you to think about the past, trying to find the most rational train of thought. The second aspect that gets the player to feel as a form of imagery is already something that I've talked about in greater depth earlier, and that is the value of life. Seeing Mono lying there lifeless after you have slain a Colossus and returned to the shrine, it poses a stark contrast. You are again killing 16 giant beasts in return for a chance to revive a girl that is not even the size of one of the fingers of the giants. However, an even greater value shows up if you look at it a bit closely. Right into the past are memories. Are the memories we've had with a loved one just as valuable as the lives of others? Is it worth to bring back someone you loved to enjoy their personality and quirks back once again? But in contrast to that, bringing them back from the dead means that you aren't content with how things in the past had ended, meaning that you are fighting for an uncertain future that you could have with someone. I still stand firm in my belief that I would not take the lives of others, but how you view the past, memories of the person, could very much sway your decision to this difficult social dilemma. Regardless of your views or beliefs, life does have a strong meaning, but a meaning in what exactly? Is it how we choose to live in the world, thinking about how we want to live in the future, or living on the memories that we have already made? There is no real answer, as we all value different things in life, and that's what the world of Shadow of the Colossus manages to present us. It offers us a choice, although not in the form of a gameplay choice, but by experiencing its narrative and gameplay, the game offers us a choice to think about what we value in life, or if we haven't found it out yet, what we want to value in life. You've probably heard me say life and lives more than enough today, but in the end, Shadow of the Colossus is a game that teaches us to take some time and value the world that we live in. Look around, look at the stars, gaze at the sunset, or watch the leaves fly, because every moment we spend in the present ultimately becomes a memory, and a memory that we can think about can help us look into the future and think about how we want to live out our lives. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video, and any support or critiques are appreciated. If you want to see more of me, my Twitter, Patreon, and new Discord server are all linked in the description down below. Not much else to say other than I tweet regularly. I intend to post on Patreon once I have one singular patron, and if you want to hang out, the Discord server is there, so yeah, just join in and talk, I guess. That's what you do there. Yeah, as for now, I've been playing a lot of Fortnite and Fall Guys. The Dragon Ball update really had me hooked for a while, and the game is good fun, but other than that, I've got to finish Shadow of the Colossus and Hotline Miami, and you'll see I've got an upcoming video on Hotline Miami. Well, it's somewhere down the line. I need to finish the game first before I do any planning on the videos that I plan to do on it then, but stay tuned, it's gonna be quite exciting, and yeah, I gotta get stuff ready for September too, and then other parts of life, so yeah. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. So with that, Storm, out.